fellow travellers, certainly many know of and have contributed to the Australian College of Educators, and we'll say a word about the importance of that link in a moment. Others would not necessarily have had that association, but they've had associations with many professional alliances and networks and clusters of colleagues. So this is designed to be a gathering of those who have indicated an interest in the launch of Educators Australia and see the opportunity for we as a profession to lead with others what we would see as being a very strong leadership of learning agenda across this country, and of course connecting with our colleagues internationally. Without spending an enormous amount of time on background, but nonetheless just to position ourselves in a way that I know you will have had some indication of that through the documentation that you received. Simon Gibson, I'm just going to ask you if you might say a word about the role that you played in moving us from the very important shift that took place a couple of years ago when the Australian College of Educators moved, in a sense, in-house to the Australian Council for Educational Research, because we were trying to find a way in which we were able to collaborate and to be supported by ACER, a very fine institution and one that many people know very well. And there were real opportunities for us to think about the way in which we might be able to continue to provide services, to convene, to advocate, to represent thought leadership around the profession. Just say a word about how that unfolded over the period where you led what was really a transition, and then take us through to the point where you and Ralph, as our ACR lead, managed the rather brilliant move to enrol the help of Summer.
Well, thank you for that, Tony. I think in order to reflect on where we are in the present, I think it's worthwhile going back to the past and considering James Darling's wonderful move back in 1959 to convene educators across the country and across sectors to try and provide them with an active voice in shaping where the profession was going at a particular time when there really weren't the agencies and the opportunities that we have today. And so built then a particular approach to coalescing the profession across the country to really have an active voice in enabling teachers and enabling quality teaching and learning across the country. When I came into the organisation at the beginning of last year at the invitation of Ralph and ACER, I think that like many membership associations, the Australian College of Educators was struggling to maintain its momentum as increasingly people were looking to other networks and other agencies were providing opportunities for professional learning registration and so on. But there was very clearly a need for a voice for the profession, a means of actually bringing teachers across sectors together to actually actively participate in shaping what really would be quality learning systems rather than having it dictated to. So at that particular time, in a number of conversations with a range of people, we started to rethink the possibilities of what ACE could become, to become a contemporary vehicle to harness the power of teachers across the Commonwealth and to provide them with opportunities for networking, connecting together, and genuinely becoming that voice that was needed. And we crafted out a particular model, which then we invited Summer in to help us through a consultation process to see whether or not this would actually have agency and currency with the profession. And so Summer conducted a number of workshops, online and in person, across the country, which brought us to this particular point where we communicated both with the broader profession, but also the existing members of the Australian College of Educators, to invite them to this particular point, an opportunity to hear more about the model that we're proposing and opportunities to become engaged.
Brilliant. Simon, thank you. And I want to acknowledge the fact that that work that you did with Summer and now the ongoing work gave us the Educators Australia birth. And so we'll say more about the model as this conversation unfolds. Colleagues, let me indicate that we are recording this gathering, this launch of Educators Australia, so you will receive a copy and you can share it with colleagues. Let me also indicate that we are using the Q&A function to receive your comments and questions. And so if you like to indicate your place name, please do. If you'd rather remain anonymous, then that is entirely your choice. Phil and Leela, can I just turn to you for a moment, because Phil, you are what effectively has been the outgoing president of the Australian College, and Leela, the outgoing vice president and president-elect. And so, again, we're not going to spend a huge amount of time on history, but one thing that you did at one point was to provide a Q&A. By the way, I think that, Simon, you'll put into the link that document that I referred to, the background document that was circulated. And I think, Phil and Leela, we could put in the link of the Q&A document that you created. So again, there's an opportunity for people to catch up if they desire to see just exactly what the momentum has been. But let me go to you first, Phil. If you had to try and capture the essence of the shift, the movement to what we're going to be celebrating and launching today, how would you capture that?
Well, I think the main thing I'd be saying is it's fresh and relevant. It's really contemporary. And what we're doing is we're moving to a more open framework for people. It's what we want to continue to be, of course, is the voice of the profession by the profession and transforming the profession. So really, this is exciting. This is something that couldn't be done in any other way. It's not being done by any others. And so it's really an exciting transition from what was to what is and what will be created. So I'm very excited about it.
Hey, Leela, let me just say this, really ask you this question, because we've got with us this afternoon the full range, cross-sectoral, cross-stage, early childhood through to tertiary educators, a whole range of others who are partners in the learning business with us. And that obviously includes many agencies that often provide what we might call more non-formal or informal learning opportunities. Certainly many new players in the field, including obviously technology companies and others. But essentially, as a profession, we are saying here, particularly from an intergenerational perspective, that we are one. Wherever you're located, whatever the stage of, I even hesitate to use the word career, because we are thinking now about new workplaces, new definitions of modern work, people moving more in and out of different positions. And so there really is an exciting period ahead, as Phil said. But how do we honour those who have also been on this path, have made huge professional contributions, sometimes recognised for that in various ways, and at the same time we want to equally embrace a new generation, but recognise that we can work together. There's such a buzzword at the moment around intergenerational collaborative work. How do you think about this?
Okay. Just very briefly, which I'm not good at, I just wanted to say that actually does respond to the very first question that came up, that has now since disappeared. Is this network for all educators? So thank you for speaking about that, from the continuum and also the generational experience continuum as well. So from preschool to tertiary and so forth. There are so many ways that we're going to do it. The fact that we're actually bringing people to the network table of all those groups that you spoke about, all those agencies, absolutely emphasises the fact that each and every one of our work has and should be informing each other's work as well. And that's part of what it should be doing. I work with lots of pre-service teachers, early career teachers, exceptionally experienced leaders, different groups, boards, unis, schools, whatever. And the one principle that I begin most of my work with, we are in a profession where we are never alone. And this network is going to is going to illuminate that. And I do caution that if we are alone, we've made that choice. So we are a people-based institution, that network that is going to work across all of that. We're going to feed each other more closely and have those opportunities and develop possibilities that has not been so predominantly ventured or explored previously.
Brilliant.
I can
Wonderful.
keep going, Tony.
So that's great. So Summer and Alex, I think I want to pick up on Leela's point about the use of the word network, because if you have a look at our documentation and the conversations we've had, people talk about networks, they talk about new platforms, we've talked about a digital commons, we talk about collaboratives. So Summer and Alex, why don't we just have a little bit of a conversation about form and function, because all of us are involved now in multiple networks, right? And we are still, many of us, involved in particular associations of one kind or another. So what is distinctive about the way in which we might be able to operate, given that we do now have the possibility for new platforms, new forms of interaction and connection and communication, which feels pretty exciting. Why don't you just explain that to us a little bit?
Alex, I might jump in here so that we can, have that conversation that we've had for the best part of 15 years, you and I, in terms of making networks work. This is absolutely not something that should replace something that you are a member of in that kind of way. I mean, I think, Tony, you said it right. We can hold multiple memberships of things. What this is breathing, some air into a beautiful space that we can say, hey, let's go back to when we used to have a yarn at Teach Meets, or, dare I say it, old Twitter, when it used to be quite good at actually being that global staff room. This is all about the knots of the net. Madeline Church does beautiful work in this, Tony. I'm a fan of her work. The knots in the network are the shared pieces of work, the shared lines of inquiry, the shared provocations, and the threads of those relationships between. I think Alex and I have really talked for years, make friends with clever people and do great work with them. So Alex, I'll talk to you about this question to piggyback off what Tony was asking. We've been networked for a while, for a long time, 15 years. Can you believe it?
Yeah.
And that's kind of been really pivotal to us as professionals. What does that mean to you?
Yeah, a couple of things. I do think networks as a concept and idea really is this opportunity to expand our perspectives, whom we interact with, our reading, our thinking. And with that comes this knowledge and skill exchange where I learn from you, Summer, or other colleagues or people ahead of me. I'm looking out for people behind me. I'm journeying with people on the side. And as we exchange this knowledge and skill together, we're both mutually benefiting. And so it's this lovely reciprocal relationship which goes across years where professional networks can become friendships and support networks, and you journey with each other, form deep relationships in a professional sense where you're thinking about identity, future, getting excited, wrestling with challenges together. And really, when we're all in that space thinking together in that network, the possibilities are endless, aren't they?
They really are. And when you first heard about this kind of notion of, we've said it's a new beginning for something that has been, so valuable and will continue to be in the history and legacy of our profession. What got you excited about this notion of Educators Australia?
I think coming back to the fact that we've got this common ground of wanting to make the future the best it can be, regardless of what aspect of education we look at. And if we look in the past in history of people who have been united over a common goal and cause, the opportunity to start something fresh and exciting and look at the history and legacy where Australian education is at the moment and where we want to be heading, and then saying who can we work with together to have those deep knots, that network, and then think about what's possible. And that's what I'm really excited about, this opportunity, the conversation education, and of course the relationships, the collegiality, the collaboration that will come from this. Sign me up. I'm very excited.
And I think there's a couple of questions in the chat, Tony, that we can then sort of start to bounce off around, you know, will this, is this different and will it complement ACL? I think the answer is yes to both. It's different in terms of it's a little bit, okay, it's a lot less structured. I mean, we are going to really look at how the net works. This is about convening something, setting in place a motion and letting it thrive and survive if it needs to on its own. Will it complement ACL? Of course it will. That's very much a peak body for us belonging as ed leaders in our country. And will it feed in and out? I mean, Tony, you're probably best placed to respond to that. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, I think there are professional bodies who have described themselves and can continue to describe themselves as peak bodies. And certainly, given that question, ACL is one of those, where because of the leadership focus, you can, I think, mobilise leaders at multiple levels of the system around key issues and engage at multiple levels of the system to advance both leadership effectiveness, but also to ensure that you exercise that leadership in influencing the shaping of policy, the shaping of practice, the shaping of research, and ultimately the shaping of the system itself. Now, I think the opportunity here is one of complementarity. We've got a chance of being able to recognise that there are multiple players in the education business, and that a network of this kind could give rise to, and we'll talk about this a little more, could give rise to ways in which we can seriously reform and ultimately transform the learning business in the best interests of all young people in this country. So in that sense, we share a common agenda. I think multiple forms of professional conduct and contribution is hugely helpful. We are into diversity, but we think that this particular digital commons will be attractive to many people who are increasingly acting in these kinds of network arrangements and find that the best way of contributing, expressing and sharing.
Tony, I just want to make some comments from the commentary that's coming through, and there's a theme of we feel really included. Thank you very much. And there's clarification. I'm a pre-service teacher or an undergrad. Am I included? Of course. There is no question of that. Someone from India has joined us, and they are saying that they feel that they want to be part of this collaboration despite the title of the group.
Yes. Well,
Absolutely, yes, yes.
We wondered whether, in fact, you know, it was Educators Global, but that seemed like a little bit of
ambitious,
ambitious. But we'd love to be inclusive.
Yeah.
Hey,
So there's comments very much about. Sorry, there's comments very much about that. Someone is asking about, and this will explain that we are fully inclusive. They're asking about any work around or overlap work with the organisations such as the Australian Education Union, the AEU, and so forth. So any response there, Tony?
Well, again, I think that as the network starts to mature, and I'm thinking we might go through a number of levels of maturity, Summer and Alex, but as we start to gather in various ways and issues are addressed, I think that there will be natural partnerships with others in order to advance thinking, and particularly the conversion of thinking into potential assets. I mean, they could be assets in the form of their own subgroups that go deeper into an issue and then prepared to share that through a research orientation, through ways in which we might actually develop some toolkits of one kind or another. There could be new and old forms of publication. But I would imagine, for example, and we'll speak about this a little later, that the preoccupation, quite rightly at the moment, that we have with the educated workforce, as we think about the way in which we can potentially develop that workforce, attract people to it, and ensure that, in fact, we can have a more diversified workforce, we would be wanting to work explicitly hand in hand with teacher education unions and associations. I mean, you can't do the work without that. And so therefore, yes, the answer is, to the extent that we can build a network of alliances and then almost movement-like, I think we can find ways in which we can advance an agenda, which is a deeply collaborative agenda.
Right. And Tony, I'm not going to let us go to the agenda yet. Jill, I want you to know that we will respond to your 2 paragraphs of commentary.
I love it.
And no, it's great, Jill. Thank you so much. And if we could just say, because I'm not sure that Simon and Phil have seen it, but if you could drop the documents into the Q&A, because people can't access the chat facility. So because we've been asked about the documents too.
Okay.
Sorry, Phil.
No, those are just saying, okay, I'll do that now. Yeah.
All right, that's
Beautiful.
great.
But just
Hey,
make sure that you put in everyone, and everyone will be able to see those documents. Otherwise,
Correct.
it's default just
Yeah.
to host. Tony, we've got
Summer and Alex, I just have to ask you this question as we think about the way in which we will, how can I put it, respect each other.
Yeah.
I don't mean so much a code of practice, but certainly potentially a code of ethics. I mean, we often many of us start our sessions with saying, look, we have some rules of engagement. By the way, the emphasis is on the engagement rather than the rules. But what way is it that we will moderate and mediate a fantastic space for deep collaboration with a purpose around learning, which is, by the way, much more focused upon the development of self and others and the planet than it is on potentially more narrow forms of purpose. But at the same time, how do we do it in a way where we do feel safe, and yet we want to be open and engage in really respectful and truthful exchanges?
Alex, I'm going to hand over to you for your your aspirational thoughts, and then I'm going to give a little bit of a context around what it might actually look like as well.
Yeah, sounds good. I think we've picked up on this word inclusion so far, Tony, and I do think we can come back to the aspect of deep listening and being present, and the nature of educators being so highly relational with each other, with our students, with stakeholders in our profession. And so really coming back to the fact that seeing each other as humans, respecting each other as professionals, and then have that aspect of deep listening. So coming to the network with, what can I learn from you? How can we be learning together? Setting up those protocols, those agreements, those principles, if you like, and then having that mindset and an eye to always bettering each other and the work we're doing through Educators Australia. So really coming back to that deep listening and positioning ourselves intentionally, I think, is key.
So Tony, I'm going to jump on the back of that and say promoting and ensuring inclusivity and fostering strong and productive networking were actually 2 of the key core principles that emerged out of the sort of validation process that was all across the country as well. I want to share another 6 of those that have come out, and then sort of talk about the tangibility of it as well. So if we start with that, promoting, ensuring inclusivity, that we're fostering strong and productive networking. So that 2-way exchange of learning, as you were saying there, Alex, building a community. You build a community by being nice to people. You know, I know this needs to be said, but assume good intent there too. Focusing on education for equity. That's a really key one there too. This thou shalt not, spruik one's wares might come into mind there, that this is about all learners everywhere, all professionals everywhere, and making sure that we've got an eye on that and how we can work towards it and share. Having a clear strategic and operational position. So, we're there around, hey, let's have those big chats that might have that long-term impact. And Tony, we'll get to this, but let's rally around some very specific lines of inquiry so that the chat, as wild and woolly as it can be and should be, and can also be laser-like focused. We said in the validation that it's about supporting early career teachers. When we're looking at some of those ways of working, how might our language be bringing in those early career teachers that are still learning the art and science and still forming what it's like to be a networked professional and have a professional identity? It's connecting everyone in all career stages, and importantly, to bookend, I think, encouraging that collaboration and collective decision making. So Tony, in any of the digital commons spaces, we're going to really trust the power of the professional in there and to call things in and to call them out if we need to. Of course, we've got those mechanisms to be able to have some of those bigger conversations and maybe give someone a little cooling off period for a while. But another way that I want to talk about how we can tangibly get into this, and I've popped it in the chat and I'll pop it into the chat again. It's being respectful of how people want to engage in this. There's kind of 3 levels, isn't there, Tony? You're all in. I'm doing projects. I'm in all of these channels in the digital commons. I'm exchanging. I'm really putting some skin in the game there. As you said, I'm creating some artifacts. I'm creating some tools. I might be sort of a face that brings others in. And then to sort of say, look, I'm really interested in being a part of the conversation. I'll dip in and out as I want to. But I definitely want you to be sending me things. And then, of course, observing. Just send me emails. I don't want to be on some big, loud network that's shooting notifications at me all the time. And that's fine. What we've created is just a little bit of a data gathering. And there's a big disclaimer there. It's only used for Educators Australia and for us as fellow educators to help you get connected. But for you to be able to tell us at the moment, this is how I'd like to be involved. And then we can administer it from there so that it's not as loud as you think it is to start off with as well. Tony.
Hey, that's great. I think that's the kind of, classic innovation, that sort of community of interest, community of engagement, community of practice. And you can stay within one of those communities and be less fully committed, or you can move into a community of practice where you really take some leadership. So let me just reflect on this so that people are clear. And then I'm going to ask Leela a question and then see whether she's got some others. By the way, can I remind you that the only way in which we're able to operate, given the numbers, is for people to put in the Q&A a comment and a question. They're also clear at the moment that we're having difficulty loading documents onto Q&A, so we'll load them onto chat because we know we can send them out. It's just that we may not be able to get chat coming in at the moment. But I suppose I'm just wanting to be clear. I loved your language at one point there, so you said, if there needs to be a cooling off period, or if we need to mediate something that we feel is moving into a space that is not going to be, and now this is difficult because this is not meant to be censorship, and this is certainly not meant to be making our values the values by which we all abide. But there will clearly be cases where we don't think something is going to be helpful to the network. And behind the scenes, we're in a position where we can both do something about that and communicate with any who are feeling that we are intervening in an inappropriate way. I take it that's the case.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, we want to be able to protect, and we have seen it many times on many different forums where educators, we speak so passionately that sometimes we might even let that bubble over and tip over sometimes. And look, things usually recalibrate because we're clever people with a common aim and a common goal, who want to make sure that we are getting the most out of being part of a network and then what we can pull out of the network too. I know, Tony, that it's ambitious here and maybe not something we would necessarily, say in term 4 on a Monday morning. So it's Friday, a Monday morning in some of our classrooms. But hey, let's see how we go.
Yeah,
and let's calibrate it from there.
Let it evolve. Yeah. And now I suppose the other point, I want to go back to Phil and Leela for a moment. And Leela, if there's some questions that you might have gathered, and then we will go to perhaps some of the major lines of inquiry that we were brave enough to identify that might be of some interest, but this is not meant to be in any sense an exclusive agenda. But Phil and Leela, let me just be clear. Look, there are plenty of organisations that also operate on the basis of a network approach. They have networks within the association. They have interest groups within the association. They have connecting points around particular themes for a given period. So I guess, Phil and Leela, I'd say to you, question without notice, I don't think we want to claim that this is completely unique. In fact, I should just drop completely. I don't think we want to claim this is unique. But it is, we think, different enough to be able to try and send a message that we see an opportunity for the profession to interact, to engage, to share in what did you say before, Phil? An open way. So, Phil, have you got an additional comment on that? And Leela, you've been talking to members of the previous Australian College of Education, as I have, and I think they'll be saying, well, hold on, will this actually serve my professional needs? So we should be conscious of the fact that there's going to be not only those three categories of innovation, there's going to be a full spectrum of enthusiasm for this, and we'll have to think about how we what's the right word, orchestrate this, Phil, over a period of time.
Yeah, and thanks, Tony. You know, I can see a question there from Jenny Lewis about, you know, is this about members? Well, it's not like an organisation that, you know, has formal members and you pay your fees and you end up being a fellow or something like that. We're more like, as you say in the question there, Jenny, more like networkers, and it's got that fluidity to it. You can be a part of a network, various networks over common interests. I can also see a question there from Brian Colwell about how do we get this off the ground? Who gets it started? So Tony, I might flick that one back to you, because that really has to do with the questions we might pitch. And of course, part of that is also it's the networkers that will get it off the ground, and with us facilitating that.
Yeah, Tony, I might just very briefly, before I go to some questions and clarifications from our colleagues, but I was reflecting on my first 41 years in and around schools and universities, and I'm looking forward to another few decades of that. And I actually can't recall a time or a role or a responsibility where I wasn't involved in some sort of network. However, the difference here is that was for a slice of time, or for the particular responsibility that I had at that, you know, those years or whatever it was. This network is actually looking at all of us, as I said before, at the continuum table, at the inclusion table, feeding off each other. So Tony said, you know, some people will be saying, how will this meet my professional needs? And that will be part of the voice of colleagues moving forward. But it's actually should be looked at it as a partnership, because it is meeting your professional needs, but it'll also be about how can you meet the professional needs of others in our network as well. So it's going to be that growing and evolving work that is, and I think that is unique, Tony, that we have so many people at the table. And I just want to emphasize the commentary on the Q&A is emphasizing that. And I mentioned someone from India. I also want to call out to someone from Finland, right across all states and territories. We're getting them. So it is already at this first meeting or gathering pretty inclusive, I would think.
All right, well, just before we go,
inclusive.
That's great. Well, just before we go to a few more Q&A, and then we'll come back to some of the themes that ones that we know all of us at the moment are confronting. I think that question that Brian asks, and also the earlier question around structure, I mean, Summer, maybe you and I just should have a little exchange here and say that what we've wanted to do, and this is in the spirit of Phil, is to find ways in which we could facilitate the network, support it without being too interventionist, convene, and I mean convene from hopefully a position of being a trusted convener. And therefore, there are a few of us who put our hands up in the early stage, at least to ensure that there is a level of support, dare I say even infrastructure, but let's not overstate the structure, a degree of infrastructure that allows us to orchestrate this. You've got, and you've been prepared to accept, thank you, with huge generosity on your part, a role of being a national convener of Educators Australia. I've indicated that the Centre for Strategic Education can be a useful supporter of this work, because we are well connected to the profession, and our own object is to support the profession across all sectors, across all years. So we've got a kind of purpose that is pretty much aligned to what Educators Australia is wanting to be. And so again, we hope that we can support in various ways. As work emerges, there could be ways in which we can give it form. There could be ways in which we can help to share, to publish. So all of that is a possibility, and we want to give Educators Australia that level of support. And then I think ACR is important because ACR has indicated that they are prepared to, in effect, be a continuing, what's the right language, Simon? Oh, good. Ralph is here to tell me what the right language is. That is fantastic. So, Ralph, is it a library, a repository, a point of historical significance? But it's not, I don't feel like it's just that. We're talking about ACR, we're talking about the premier research organisation in not only this country, but actually with 6 international offices spread across Global North and Global South. So we are delighted that we've had the support of ACR, but I think we're going to have the continuing support of ACR, Ralph.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. And can I just take the opportunity from all of us to thank you for the energy you've put into this conversation so far. It's been a really important part of, I think, this birth of a new organisation. Look, Tony, as you know, research is pretty clear. The kinds of transformations that we are looking to see in learning systems around the world, certainly in Australia, are simply not going to happen without the voice, agency and leadership of the profession. And that's becoming increasingly clear to us in recent decades, at exactly the time that it's becoming increasingly clear to us that the kinds of models of professional association and professional voice that occurred in the previous century aren't really providing those opportunities for the new voices, for the kinds of inclusive conversations that we need to hear to affect those changes, to spread those ideas, to work in network sort of form. So it's really exciting from ACR's perspective. It's really exciting to see this idea emerge. And ACR is really committed to doing what it can do to support the development of Educators Australia. We're still in conversations with yourself, with Summer, with others around what form that support will take. One thing that we've identified is the opportunity to use ACR's Cunningham Library to provide effectively an archiving and repository service for the kinds of knowledge resources, the kinds of information services that have been generated previously by other kinds of professional groupings and associations, and we hope will continue to be generated and really accelerated through the networking opportunities that we have with Educators Australia. So exactly what form that will take may depend on the kinds of forms of knowledge that is developed and generated and how those are, but we're really excited at the opportunity to provide some support for that as it emerges and develops.
That's great. I'll come back to Simon in a moment because I think there might have been a couple of key issues that emerged from the consultation process that Simon might pick up on in terms of us wanting to anticipate people's needs and interests. We won't go too far into that, but there might just be a couple of points that Simon wants to highlight. But just before I do, can I go back to the Q&A for a moment? Although, have I just noted that we've got a bit of an issue with Q&A as well as chat now, Lila?
I think that there's not clarity around this because we're referencing what's in the chat and no one else can see that. And so people are thinking the Q&A is not working.
Oh, okay.
But I think that's the problem. But we haven't been able to drop the documents into the Q&A yet. So I know that some of
we have. They're in there. They're all in there and all good to go.
Oh, great.
Oh, that's great.
In the Q&A?
They're there in the chat. Everybody is able to see those.
Oh, fantastic. Okay.
Lovely.
So that's great clarity around the bigger picture. So Tony, one of the questions, or Tony and Summer, and I really like this, and it's from Jason, because I think this clarifies the underlying principles of operation, if I could say that is, what is the governance model of Educators Australia?
Well, I'll tell you what, Summer, I think we should say that it's light touch. And I'm really pleased
right.
the language is governance rather than government. And you
Mm.
might have a view about this, Simon, and it might have come through in the consultation process about just how a network like this, which, by the way, normally the response is it'll be self-managing.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
we think self-managing is right because there will be a sense in which we will take collective responsibility in the way that Summer and Alex have already indicated, that there will be a collective professional responsibility for how we conduct ourselves. And certainly there will be issues that emerge, and then we'll see some crowdsourcing around a couple of these areas that might just get a momentum and attract more people. But there is a light touch around governance in the sense that we've got a small group of us who will, how can I describe it best, be stewards.
Yes, I think that's a great way to say it.
Stewards of the network. There'll be particular roles that I mentioned, you in the convening role, Summer, and I think myself in a kind of supportive role through a like-minded organisation, and Ralph able to provide, again, a level of connection to both past and future. So, Simon, I feel like we don't want to go much further down the track of governance, because at the moment it'll get us into territory around membership, potentially, that we've actually said is not the language we're using. There's no fees, so there's not membership dues, right? There's not committees in the way that we might have used them before, or even temporary interest groups, Leela, as you said, you'd experienced. So if people are prepared to live with a little bit of ambiguity around a governance that we hope will start to emerge, but much more in the spirit of self-governing rather than governance. But Simon, I don't know, that's pretty tough to ask you whether that resonates with what you saw, but what else did you see in the consultation process?
Well, I'll answer the first part, Tony, which is that it did resonate. And I think that the feedback that we were getting, particularly from those educators new to the profession, was that they didn't actually want to join an association. And I think this follows through in a whole range of different areas of professional life across the world, that they were looking for networks where they could actually meet with people who had similar interests or a similar focus or similar pain points, to explore with them to find solutions or initiatives that would assist them. And those associations were not necessarily with people who taught next door, but they could be people who taught at the other side of the country. And they wanted the flexibility and freedom to connect with people around shared interest, shared passion, shared pain points, to come up with solutions. They didn't want to be part of a fixed committee structure or fixed organisation necessarily. They were looking for different ways of networking, different ways of connecting, and that's and they didn't want to pay subs and a regular membership fee, nor to get bogged down in committee structures and so on, which became the drivers for an association rather than the outcomes.
Yeah, I think we should think more of ourselves as an ecosystem. I know that everybody is using that language, but I think an ecosystem which is obviously self-organizing, but actually where the governance insists upon ways in which we can be healthy. So a healthy learning ecosystem, which is what we want to be, would obviously focus upon human thriving, right? That's what we're about. It's a human-centered enterprise we're in, and we want to thrive and flourish as a purpose for learning. We certainly want to have a vision for education which is futures oriented. We certainly want to make sure that what we do focuses upon equitable and accessible learning opportunities. We want definitely an expert and flourishing workforce. We are definitely going to be able to use what we would see as being rich digital systems. And I think that we've got a real chance at times of being able to give our professional recognition to each other in ways that we've often relied upon others. So let's see how that emerges. Let me move, given the timing. Summer, we did risk ourselves, but just before I do, Leela.
Sorry, yes, I just wanted to say that was a really important aspect of the conversations that's coming through, because it is once again highlighting the points of difference for this network. You know, it's inclusive. It's going to be evolved from what our colleagues want and need. The light touch that we're going to have, all that ecosystem work is actually going to be part of the uniqueness of what this network will offer, as opposed to anything else. And we're getting asked a lot about, can individuals be, and I'm going to use the word participants, or I'm not going to use the M word any longer, organisations, how will we engage professional associations? There are so many aspects of that that's a lively piece of work that we can all be contributing to as well. We're all members of other associations or agencies that have governance. So that's why that was really an important response that we needed. We're also being asked about planning and so forth and outputs. And it was great, Tony, that you referenced the vision and then you went through some of the aspects. So that's really taking it to another level as well and giving a bit more clarity and substance to what this network is going to offer. Thank you.
Yeah, I must think, as you're saying that, I think knowing, our colleagues who are across the whole of the education landscape, the more we can see ourselves as being complementary to a diversity of professional activity with different partners taking a lead in various ways. Sometimes it might be an organisation that's got a capacity to do that and to step into a place of leadership or influence or shaping and be able to help the network advance an agenda in a way that the network, without that partnership, without that organisational support. So I think we ought to make this very clear that it's really an opportunity for great diversity and for a real opportunity to have complementarity. Summer, we did identify a couple of themes that we thought were really starting to emerge and on people's minds.
Yeah, we did. And I'm wanting to kind of present these to us as a hopeful gateway to a response into some of the questions in the chat as well. A real mental model of this being a self-sustaining network, unapologetically, that this doesn't have, funding with having to then look at sort of deliverables from there. Will there be resources available for promising responses to these lines of inquiry? Yeah, absolutely. We're looking into this. And in terms of the interest of these 3 lines of inquiry that ministers or decision makers, governments might have, we think is intriguing. You'll see that Tony and the team and I are always using this word of our hunch is, we think, the potential of. People came back to us in this sort of validation or consultation process and said, wouldn't it be great if it wasn't kind of tied to a thing, but it was really aspirational, and the weight of people who were in these conversations and the lines of inquiry, the diversity of the memberships of those kind of teams of people that were going after some of these lines of inquiry would pique the interest of some of those decision makers. So we are, Tony, unapologetically untied. We're unapologetically, I want to say unaligned, but of course we're all calibrated in the same way. Will you be able to have then special interest groups that then knock on the door of EA and say, what do you reckon with this? We're onto something pretty interesting here. Please do. We're really excited of that. And these 3 lines of inquiry are things that came from those hundreds of conversations and thousands of hours of conversations. What are the skill sets, mindsets, and knowledge sets that we reckon our people need to lead some transformations of tomorrow? And Tony, I'd say today as well, tomorrow being literally tomorrow, and tomorrow being, a beyond 2000 sort of mental model organizer there. To have a think about our early career teachers, what's going to elevate them, what is going to ensure that they're not just holding on, but they are absolutely thriving and flourishing and leading the demands of teaching in a good way, those emotional, those physical, those cognitive demands. And then thinking about what is the role of a teacher? We've got lots of clever people here who are working in hybrid ways, who are looking at different workforces and obviously looking at different ways that young people access learning. What might that mean for us in educators? And of course, we've got classroom teachers, we've got academics, we've got people who spent their whole careers in education and are now deeply invested in education, but maybe on a beach somewhere. And these all of these lived and learned and studied experiences is what is going to form the basis of the credibility of this network. So for 2024, Tony, we're inviting people to dip your toe in the water, just be out there with interest, as you said, community of interest. Are you going to be engaged in this? Oh, that's interesting work. Let me spread it. Or are you going to be involved in the practice of this? Let me dig in deep. Let me share with you some of my research. Let me give some of my time and energy to create some tools to be part of this as well. Lots of choice involved in how you might like to network there too, Tony.
That's beautiful. Well, I think we'll look to give it a little form and function. Obviously, we'll kickstart a few conversations here, and certainly the themes that you see on the screen at the moment are ones that are going to resonate with people. But don't treat this as being anything other than a kind of advanced organizer that might take off, or it might actually ultimately move into a different direction. But look, we should be aware of this, that here we are toward the end of 23, and I'm going to come back to a conversation, if I can bring everybody on screen, back to a conversation that we all know is happening. This network, Educators Australia, is not happening outside of major national activity. We've got three huge reviews going on. Early years, we've got obviously what will be released mid-December in terms of the next National School Reform Agreement. We've got the Accord that obviously now deals not just with higher education, but actually the whole of tertiary education. There's talk next year of perhaps the first national education plan for 10 years emerging out of national conversations that the Commonwealth and the states and territories might come around. So we don't want to suggest for one moment that we're going to be disconnected from national conversations that at times are more led by government than they are by the profession. What we are saying is, as I think Ralph said before, none of this will take place without the profession. And increasingly, governments recognise in this country and in other jurisdictions that it's a partnership if we are going to be able to advance our agenda and get far more success for young people. There are a couple of issues that are really starting to emerge. It's not just the shortage of teachers that is putting a focus upon the future of a workforce. We're talking about potentially a very different educator workforce for the future, far more differentiated, far more in partnership with allied professionals, right? We're thinking about the way in which schools will operate in use of time, space, and people, very different designs. We've had a few, I think, forays into this from the press, where they've got hold of certain people to say, hey, is it true that you want to put an end to age grade year levels, right? Or how do you actually get better relationships for kids? Because we've got huge problems at the moment with well-being. And isn't it better to have deep relationships that last? So, you know, looping comes up as being a solution. All of a sudden, we've got in the daily press, you know, a couple of solutions, which we think will take several years, right, of professional leadership with the help of government and industry and further education and higher education and community agencies and tech companies. Like, this is going to be a fantastic opportunity for us to transform the way in which we do things. Now, some people don't like that language. They'll definitely want to use language like reform or innovate or improve. So we're not going to ask people to make sure they're all using the same language. But if we have similar meanings to our work, that'd be helpful. So here we go. We're going to wrap up just with a final comment from each of you. It could be a hope or aspiration, or it could be a final issue that you think needs to be on the table and needs to be pursued. So I'm going to end with Summer, because she's our national convener. Alex, I'm going to start with you. And you've only got around about 30 seconds to say what your hope aspiration might be.
I'm looking forward to a revolutionized teaching profession that's never been more coherent, aligned, on board for the betterment of our education society and our young people.
Thank you very much. Simon.
I just think it's going back to the original foundation of the Australian College of Education and this vision to have a unified, coherent voice for the profession, and a chance now to reimagine it for the third decade of the 21st century.
Thank you very much indeed. Ralph.
You know, I love the word transformation. We don't all have to use it, but what we are looking at is a transformation, and we remember that the transformation we need is a transformation that will change the life outcomes of the young people and people that we work with as educators.
Brilliant. Leela.
Voice, advocacy, unique, embracing, inclusive. They're the principles of our work. It's now going to be the principles of our network.
Oh, that's a good line. Thank you, Phil.
Yeah, look, I'd throw in mobilising, because I imagine there's a lot of people listening in here, and even those that haven't been able to join today, that really they want their voice heard instead of others speaking on behalf of teachers, or supposedly, or purporting to, or others telling teachers what they should be doing. I think we've got a chance to mobilise the voice here through these various networks that we'll be creating.
Brilliant. Hey, Summer, you've got the last 2.5 minutes, and you've got to cover next steps, because people will want to know, how do I make sure I'm connected?
Yeah, I love that, Tony. And my big thing is you're invited, you're invited, you're invited. This is invitational by throwing that in the air, Oprah style. Everybody gets an invitation, because this is something that is inclusive. We want people to feel like they belong. And it's not you're in doing this or you're not. There's levels to it. Your immediate next step, I've put it into the chat quite a few times, is to get to that type form, and it is to tell us how you'd like to be. Of course, at the 11th hour, Slack here is being slack on us. Let's not worry so much about those things. We'll fix those in the background. But as long as I've got a way, along with my colleagues here, to get in touch with you, to do some of the manual entering in the background, but you are going to be hearing a lot about shared ways that we can get involved in those knots, so that we can tighten those threads. You have a look behind Phil there. That's the very essence of what we're trying to identify with. The network will only work if the net works. It's not up to a convening group of people. This is a shared responsibility to have our I want to say our voice, but this is the guts of just sharing what we love in the hope of more people loving what we do and going from there. Tony, I'm excited.
Fantastic. Well, look, colleagues, let's just say thank you. We really appreciate the level of response and interest and potential engagement. We know that you will influence the shape and form of this network, and that's exactly the whole idea, to exercise your influence, to have impact. We know that this is a launch at a moment in the year where a few of us are interested in our individual and collective well-being. So the level of intensity that might happen over Christmas and New Year will be less than what will happen in the new year, but we're going to stay in touch, and we're going to obviously convene like this a few times so that people are able to feel a sense of identity and connection, but we won't overdo it. We'll see how the network unfolds, but this really is an exciting opportunity, I think, for all of us. And let's be clear, this is seriously about uniting generations. This is intergenerational. This is serious about sharing our power. And I don't mean personalized power, I mean our socialized power. Sharing that in order to transform education for young people, all young people in this country, and our connections globally. So thank you once again. Looking forward to all of our work together.
Sounds great. Thanks, Tony. Thanks, everyone.
Wonderful.